Hello YouTubers, this is Jerry Saravia the Movies. So today I'm just going to make sort of a generalized comment about films, and that there are in fact 4 different kinds of films. I've added one more to the list that exist. And the reason I bring this up is because the other day I saw again for I think the 5th or 6th time in my life an Andalusian doll. And this was a film by a Spanish filmmaker who's no longer around, Luis Buñuel, who made it in 1928, 1929, with the help of Salvador Dali, who certainly is central to the surrealist movement of that period. Now, the purpose of the film was really to, I believe, shock the audience. And in those days, shocking an audience, I mean, let's be honest, people were really shocked by Boris Karloff and Frankenstein in 1931 and Dracula in 1931. So, although we may consider those films to be anything other than shocking, they were shocking at that time. This film certainly was shocking. And to give you an idea, it starts off infamously, if you like, with Luis Buñuel himself, who's sharpening his razor, and he basically slices a woman's eye open in close-up. Even today, a scene like that still kind of is revolting, even in black and white. It's very striking, disturbing, etc. This is what starts the film. So it's a 17-minute short film that he did back then. And I've seen it actually at the Biograph in New York back in the 80s. It was a double feature with that film and the very funny Assignment of the Desert, also by Luis Buñuel. So it was kind of a Buñuel retrospective, 2 different films. Now, when I saw it then, it shocked the audience. Like, whoa, what is this? Particularly with that scene. And then later on, I saw it at another screening at a college, and it was the same sort of revulsion. And then the following class, or I think in the same class, we watched That Obscure Object of Desire, also by Buñuel. So, the point is that there is a film here, which is doesn't really have necessarily a point to make, but it assaults you, it's provocative, and it's meant to shock. So taking the whole idea of what is established narrative, even in those days, which was still literary as its source, and saying, you don't need to be literary, we can just throw images on the screen and shock you. And it does that, it gets your attention. So, 4 different kinds of films. So, the first kind of film is the one that is usually entertaining and intellectual. Hollywood has been known to do that at its very best. Basically a film that does have something to say. It's constructed in such a way that it has 3 different acts, so it follows the literary narrative model. And it's intellectual, so it can entertain you, but it also has something to say. It has, if you like, a point. Then there's the kind of film where it's really just entertainment. It's not necessarily meant to be intellectual, it's just out to thrill you, to amaze you perhaps, but not necessarily meant to say anything subversive or whatever, but certainly not out to make a point. However, usually those type of movies have something underneath the surface that you have to kind of dig a little bit to find it. And it's there. So there is a context, but done in such a way that it's, how can I put it, the entertainment value gets to you, but not the context. Then there's a type of film that doesn't do that at all. That's the third kind of film. And that kind of film basically is really not out necessarily to entertain you, to be provocative, to be intellectual. It's just a formula type movie. Mediocre, and that's that. It is what it is type movie. So for the first kind of film, intellectual and entertaining, I can mention Network. Network would be one of those movies. Taxi Driver, All the President's Men, let's see, I mean, there are just so many. I can go on and on. A Clockwork Orange, etc., etc. The second kind of film would be, let's say, for lack of a better example that doesn't come to mind immediately, Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, Arnold Schwarzenegger in True Lies, The Terminator. These are films that ostensibly look like B movies, but in fact do have something to say. So that's entertainment, but with a subtext, something in context, but underneath the surface. And then the third kind of film would be one that I revisited recently, which was pure exploitation, called Vigilante, with Robert Forster from back in 1983. It's a piece of anonymous crap, and it does nothing. It's not even entertaining. It's just crap. So you could probably call those just bad movies, bad art, if you like. But it's not even enough to be art. And there are many exploitation films like that. So Friday the 13th, whatever. I love Nightmare on Elm Street because I think it has something deeper to say. But basically, slasher films, whatever the case may be. In that second category, by the way, you could even put in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is ostensibly a slasher, feverish, bad dream, but there is something of a subtext there. But of course, I'm not going to get into that right now. So, the fourth kind of film is usually the kind of film where you have no idea what's going on, and you have to see it more than once, but it illuminates your conscience, perhaps, or it gets to you in some way. But you don't know what it is that you're responding to. But it is transcendental. It is non-narrative in many ways, perhaps not relying on narrative to tell a story, but somehow trying to tell you a story with images and with little asides and performances and music, and doing it in such a way that it gets under your skin, but it's not the norm. It's not mediocre. It's certainly transcendental, for lack of a better phrase. So, films that do that. David Lynch's films, Mulholland Drive, Blue Velvet. Mulholland Drive is my favorite film by David Lynch. Eraserhead. Louis Buñuel's Andalusian Doll would be perfect for that. And then a film that I have to revisit one of these days, I believe it came out in 1989, called My 20th Century, which was a startling film. It really got to me. I was entranced by it, but I couldn't really tell you what exactly it was about. I don't know. It seemed like it was set during the period of the early silent film days, but the way it was done, it was all mood. And that's the thing, mood. It's intoxicating because of the mood. It gets to you. It's visually spectacular. It's amazing to watch, but you don't know what you're watching, or you're not sure, because it's not formulaic, it ain't mediocre, it ain't exploitation, it's not the traditional narrative that Hollywood usually deals with. So those are the four different types of films in my mind. And I love to hear from other people out there, particularly films that fall in that fourth category, like Andalusian Doll. Films that get to you in some way. You don't know what it is, because it's not traditional, it's not the usual, it's not mediocre, it's not formulaic. What is it? And those are the films that interest me the most, and usually end up on my list of greatest films of all time, because you eventually start to interpret and see it in such a way that it may not be what the filmmaker intended, or exactly what the filmmaker intended, or not at all. Andrei Rublev, for example, by Andrei Tarkovsky. It's an amazing film. I just couldn't really tell you exactly what it's about, but it's about mood, texture. Films can be that. And some people consider that pretentious, and that's a shame because it's not. I mean, if it gets to you in some way, it's working. It's not working. It's doing its job. It's art. See, art in film is a very tricky thing because everybody has a different definition. Andrew Sarris, a film critic for the New York Observer, who passed away a little while ago, he had made a comment in a video movie guide, which I don't think is even around anymore, I'm not sure, but it was an interview. And he said that film can't be art because it's a combination of all the art forms. So sculpture, painting, art direction, music. How can one thing that encompasses all this be an art form? It's an interesting question. I do think it's art, but I think there are gradations of it. There's no one specific way of making a movie. There just isn't. And that's proof of it. So, anyway, I just wanted to make that comment, particularly after seeing the Andalou doll. And this is Jerry Saravia, The Movies, signing off.